Now the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, whose team 5 wins in a row, now 6-4, chasing the New England Patriots in the AFC East. Adam Gase, kind enough to spend some time with us. Adam, thank you. How you doing?
What's going on, Paul?
So Thanksgiving tomorrow. You 100% football? Turkey, relaxation? You watching football as a fan? Walk me through the Thanksgiving day of an NFL head coach.
Just going to go through my normal day. Our players will take the evening off. We won't have our afternoon meetings, and then I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll probably just do what I normally do. I'm sure there'll be something going on, but I probably won't be participating in it.
If I didn't remind you right now that Thanksgiving is tomorrow, would you have known?
The only reason why I know is because I keep getting reminded about it.
Last time you went out and actually watched a movie with your wife, Adam, when was that? Did we lose him?
That's a terrible. I don't even know.
Every coach always has the same answer to that one. All right, let's put it in your wheelhouse. Football, Dolphins playing very well. What's the biggest difference between the team we see right now that's won 5 in a row and the team that started 1-4?
I think the biggest difference has just been kind of like our continuity, just kind of used to the system that we're running as an organization. Practice has been extremely better the last 5-6 weeks as far as the consistency, execution. So I think what our guys have done, they've translated what we've done on a weekly basis to Sundays. And we've had, less mental errors, less mistakes. And then in the fourth quarter, we've sharpened up quite a bit.
Yeah, Ryan Tannehill was terrific. 12 out of 13 in the final minutes, leading you guys to victory against the Rams in Los Angeles. You talk about less mistakes. You guys are +7 in the turnover game in that 5-game winning streak. We all see you're winning. We see the highlights of Ryan Tannehill playing well. As the one who knows him the very best, describe to us what Ryan is doing better now than he was doing earlier in the season.
I think a little bit has to do with kind of that we've gotten a little healthier. We were banged up early with our offensive line. We had some things shuffling around. I think it just, what we started with in training camp, and then we started moving some pieces around. We had to get comfortable with a new center, and that kind of can change things a little bit. And Devontae wasn't really healthy, so we're leaning heavily on Jarvis and Kenny to do a lot of things. We had some shuffling going around at the running back position, tight ends. We just had a lot of moving pieces going on in offense, and I never felt like we got real comfortable. And I think I was a little slow as far as some of the concepts that we had in were probably not the things that we should have been doing with what our skill set was with our group. And we kind of started transitioning probably after that Tennessee game as far as, okay, here's who we are. Here's what we need to kind of lean on. These are the type of passing game concepts we need to do. Here's where we need to, make an emphasis here in the run game and maybe even our play calling. So I think it just kind of all started coming together, just all happened really fast and all at once. In that Pittsburgh game, it just kind of all worked out in the same game.
How difficult is it for you as a head coach to admit what you just mentioned, that this plan I really, really liked wasn't working and I need to change? Does that come automatically, or is that a difficult transition for a head coach to make?
I think for the mentors that I had throughout my career, it's not very difficult because that's how I was raised in this profession, starting with Nick Saban, where it was about doing what did the players do best and how do we lean on that, and if we can't handle one thing, moving on to something else. And then being with March, that same thing. It was just with his system, how do I help guys get open? What do they do well? How do we do it? How does the quarterback function in it? And then lucky enough to get with Josh McDaniels for a year and a half. That was probably a really big stepping stone for me because it was a completely different way that I had learned in the past. And, it's the same thing, hit the way that he looked at how to attack a defense and what you had as far as your players go. He always would lean on, okay, here's what we can do, here's what we can't do, and just emphasizing constantly of what we can do. And I think that has always helped me be able to help put a game plan together that's best for our players, instead of saying, hey, here's our scheme and this is all we're going to do. Instead, we adapt that playbook to what our players do best.
Adam, you always appear very calm to me on the sideline. You're calm after the game, whether you won or lost. What is something, though, that makes you really angry? What makes you the most mad that something that could happen in practice or during the game that you've really got to fight that emotion and keep it in?
I think just a lot of times when we have like little minor mistakes that a lot of people won't notice, and there was a big play there to be had, and it's sometimes just the littlest tiny detail that we've covered so many times, and when you screw that up, that's where you get frustrated as a coach. And the thing is, it's what you have to understand as a coach, you have to keep reminding yourself your players are not trying to screw it up. They're trying to do everything they can, and when you get in that game, and sometimes you short circuit a little bit, and it's a violent physical game, so sometimes the emotions get the best of you, and you kind of make a slight error, and it can cost you big. But the best teams you can see, they kind of can play with emotion, but at the same time they can do their job and make those plays happen. And that's where we just need to keep building on. We have to keep building on being able to play with emotion, but at the same time doing our job correctly.
Paul Burmeister sitting in for Dan Patrick here on this Wednesday, talking to Adam Gase, the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. I think your resume, Adam, is one of the most unique in the NFL for any head coach because you were at Michigan State as a player when Nick Saban was there. You coached with Nick Saban in the first part of your career, and then you also spent a lot of years coaching Peyton Manning. So Nick Saban and Peyton Manning have had an influence on how you think about this game, how you coach the game. Which one of those two experiences do you find yourself drawing upon the most?
I think lately, like this last game, I just probably was more like Peyton Manning was kind of in my head this last game because, there was so many conversations over those 3 years I was with him as far as the game's never over, and you just keep battling until the clock hits zero. And I always think back to that Tampa game he had where I can't even remember the score when Dungy went back to Tampa for the first time, and there was minimal time left in the fourth quarter. And I mean, it was multiple touchdowns. I mean, it was a Monday night game, and I just remember we had talked about that game. I think we actually found the video at some point about, I always kept thinking, like, how can you keep that mindset of, when you're down that much, and he would just like, hey, just get that first down, figure out a way to get in the end zone, and then just keep rolling and, see what happens. And I think I just keep, in that game, I just kept leaning back on kind of that thought process of just keep playing. We're going to get this thing going. And then as long as there's time left, we got a chance. And just being around him and just know that there's always, the chance that you can get yourself back into the game. And, the NFL is weird. I mean, things happen and you just keep playing and basically until that clock hits zero.
Could you ever see Peyton coaching, and would you ever ask Peyton to be a coach for you?
I'd feel sorry for whoever the quarterback was.
Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, he's as a player, he was probably the most demanding player I've ever been around. Whether you were a coach, a player, groundskeeper, nutritionist, chef,
groundskeeper,
it didn't matter what you're. Yeah, I'm sure. Between Indy and Denver, I mean, he was a perfectionist. He wanted everything done a specific way. He was very detailed in everything that you possibly could think of throughout the entire building.
And we just had Dirk Cutter on. He was talking about texting with Jameis Winston and the communication he had, and I know he was the same with Matt Ryan. Did you ever get to a point with Peyton where you just shut it off and said, this guy's got to leave me alone at least for a couple hours?
No, we never. I don't think it ever got to that point because, it was 3 years. Maybe if it would have been like 10 years, maybe.
Right.
But I think him getting to the voice memos was a big deal because it just kind of was 12 minutes and knock everything out. A lot of the times, especially the last couple of years that we were together, a big part of his process was kind of the recovery and us emphasizing making sure that, he was doing a good job of getting his rest at night and making sure that he was recovering all the time. And, that was the toughest part because when we'd finish the game, he would stand in the pocket, take some shots. So, his body, at that age, it doesn't recover as fast when you're 23, 24 years old. So that was a big emphasis for us. So a lot of our communication had to happen earlier in the night, and then we had to kind of reconvene in the morning.
Adam, finally, thinking about your resume, I mentioned it before, but in less than 3 years, you've been in Denver, Chicago, and Miami. You have a wife and young kids. I know Thanksgiving isn't the major priority tomorrow, but any kind of Thanksgiving message that you would give to your family, considering the tour they've supported you on this last 2.5 years?
I think my family's having a good time as far as being in Miami right now. I know my kids like the fact that they're so close to the beach, and I think they've kind of enjoyed this process. When I ended up marrying somebody that's family was in this business before, so she's used to this, and I know three moves in 3 years is not the easiest thing for a family to go through, but they've handled it well, and I think they've kind of enjoyed the cities that we've lived in.
Hey, Adam, great to talk football with you and talk a little bit of life. I know you're busy getting ready for the Niners, and just want to say thank you for making time for us here today.
I appreciate it, guys.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.